The 120 RPM aggressive hand cannons are here, and they are meta picks. I didn't anticipate them actually to be meta picks. I mean, I knew they were good, but I expected them to be off meta or rogue picks. But at this point, they've proven to be a top option, and that brings up, of course, the question of which 120 RPM hand cannon is the best to be using. And even though for many of you this might feel like old news, I think the best 120 RPM hand cannon is still Sturm. However, I wanted to dive a little deeper into this discussion of what makes Sturm so great, despite not really being exciting in any way. Of course, Sturm can be paired with Drang, and that's where it does become pretty exciting. Being able to 2-tap or get the overcharged bullets is pretty neat, but I'm not going to be focusing on the pairing of these two weapons, and more so just the solo usage of Sturm and what makes it such a great 120 RPM hand cannon. Also, I thought I'd just mention, as I normally do for all my weapon discussions, I will be considering Sturm with the Catalyst unlocked and fully upgraded. The TLDR of what makes Sturm the best aggressive hand cannon is that it gets all the benefits of being, of course, a 120 RPM aggressive hand cannon, but it doesn't pay any of the traditional costs with its stats. In fact, I'd even argue that its stats are debatably better than even some of the 140 RPM hand cannons in the game. And this leads to the weapon feeling great in nearly every way, and of course have very high consistency, despite still lacking a key defining trait when used on its own. Quickly glossing over the stats of Sturm with the Catalyst, it has 93 range, 56 stability, 77 handling, 37 reload speed, 50 aim assist, of course 14 zoom, and 100 recoil direction with a 12 bullet magazine. Sturm has one of the highest range stats of any hand cannon. It has plenty stability for a 120, more on that later. It has probably one of the highest handling stats of any hand cannon in the game with 77, which is very important at high level play. It has a decent reload speed that is on par but slightly above average compared to other 120 RPMs, and it has a rather subpar aim assist stat, but this is easily made up for with its high range and its high recoil direction. It's the combination of incredibly high range and handling with very sufficient stability and 100 recoil direction that produces how consistent this weapon feels. Starting with the stability, 56 stability is actually plenty for a 120 RPM hand cannon because they have more time in between shots than that of a 140 or even in the past the 150s before they were converted. Because of that longer period of time between shots, they actually have more time for the recoil to settle, get back closer to resting position before being able to fire again. Unlike the other hand cannons I mentioned, the 140s with less time in between shots, that means they have less time to get back to resting position, which means you need more stability to help them get back to that faster to manage recoil better. That demand isn't necessarily there with the 120, so you don't need as much stability to still get some pretty pinpoint accurate shots that are tightly packed and place themselves one after another. So Sturm's stability stat is probably the sweet spot of what you want for this archetype. What makes it even better though is that it's paired with 93 range, an insanely high range stat. Now everyone knows that range is good for damage at range and damage drop off, and making sure that you can get your optimal time to kill at as many ranges as possible. That's great. However, let's talk about Sturm's range and how it affects its accuracy cone. At this point, I'm sure many of you that have watched my videos are well aware of the impact of the aim assist cone and the accuracy cone. Yeah, insert cone meme here. But for a quick recap, the accuracy cone is the area in which our bullet can go when we fire it. And the accuracy stat also dictates the chance of our bullet just going completely pinpoint straight, without any sort of what's called an error angle. On the first shot of a weapon, we call that initial accuracy, and that's when the accuracy cone is at its tightest point, and after we fire, it slightly expands. And then after we fire again, it slightly expands once more. And that's why if you fire at the hip, the lines of your crosshair, which are representative of your accuracy cone, flare out or quote unquote bloom out. So the area in which your bullet can go gets less accurate, it gets wider. But not only that, your aim assist cone, which is the circular part of your crosshair that is regulated by your stability stat, actually diminishes. It starts out on that initial accuracy point very wide, but as you fire quickly and continuously, it shrinks, it gets smaller. And the aim assist cone is the area in which, if your bullet fires within it, will be aim assisted and curved towards its target. It's the margin of error, essentially. So although Sturm might have a lower than average aim assist stat for the 120 RPM hand cannons of 50, it does have an incredibly high range stat, which means that its bullets are going to be highly accurate. They're going to have a high chance of always firing within the aim assist cone, even though that margin of error in that space might be a little bit smaller than some other weapons. Accuracy is really important to the consistency of the weapon at range as well, especially when you're firing at max rate of fire. You want your bullets to be going as straight as possible, with as little of an error angle potential as possible. And to ensure that maximum consistency at range, where your bullets are still being aim assisted and still being pinpoint resulting in headshots, you need high accuracy. And this is where Sturm's strength really lies, because normally to get to a similar or comparable range stat of the Sturm on a legendary 120 RPM, you have to give up a lot of stability. And not only is that going to impact your recoil and ability to control the recoil on the weapon, which I guess in turn does also get more drastic and harder to do at range, but as I mentioned, your stability stat impacts the level in which your aim assist cone shrinks while firing. A higher stability stat means it's not going to shrink as much. So when you have a high combination of range and stability, you get high accuracy, but not only that, you get a better maintained aim assist cone size, so a larger margin of error. And once again, the other legendary 120 RPMs typically make you pick and choose between the two. Of course, you can get decent combinations of both, like perhaps on one of my True Prophecy rolls, I have 71 range and 48 stability, which is good, but doesn't quite compare to 93 range and 56 stability. Not to mention, most of the legendary 120 RPMs don't have a 100 recoil direction stat, and as much as they do have vertical recoil direction stats, they are still slightly more jarring with a little bit more kick per shot, whereas 100 recoil direction ensures the smoothest and consistent recoil pattern possible. What I will say is, in comparison to a lot of the other 120 RPMs, of course I mentioned Sturm has a lower than average aim assist stat, but I think that cost is warranted because of how many other benefits it gives it that in turn do affect its consistency with its aim assist. Not to mention, you can easily mitigate this now by slapping on double hand cannon targeting, which gives us a projected plus 15 to 20 aim assist stat, depending on if there's diminishing returns or not, but quite frankly I haven't tested that yet, so I can't say. My point is, right now it's very easy to boost the aim assist on a hand cannon. And just as I said about the range stat and the stability stat, the handling stat's another one. Sturm has one of the highest handling stats of any hand cannon, 77, and with the other 120 RPMs, they typically have very low handling stats. Or if you want to invest in the handling stat, you're giving up other important stats, stability and range. Sturm gets 3 incredibly important stats for free, essentially. There is something to be said about legendary weapon traits. Rangefinder, Rampage, Explosive Payload, Opening Shot, these are all things that very much boost the consistency of the legendary weapons. And as much as I agree those are highly impactful, after a long time of debating with myself, I think I've come to the decision that Sturm's inherent benefits through its stat package are simply still better than those perks. Sure, 2-tapping with Rampage is really fun in 6s, and that's great, but in a highly competitive, meaningful scenario like Trials, you're far less likely to take advantage of Rampage and that 2-tap, especially if you're not running Rampage spec. And yeah, Rangefinder, Explosive Payload, and Opening Shot are all incredibly good perks, but they all just increase range or increase accuracy, both of which Sturm already does inherently well without any drawbacks. I think the one aggressive hand cannon that gets dangerously close to Sturm's consistency is the upcoming one in Iron Banner. That's the Steady Hand because of its perk rolls and its pretty good stat pool. It has a good aim assist stat of 65, it's got a recoil direction of 85, that means with a counterbalance mod, it will get 100, similar to Sturm, and it's got some really amazing perks, things like Quick Drop, Moving Target, Slide Shot, Killing Wind, all in the first column, and then in the second column, Swashbuckler, Wellspring, Snapshot, and even the Iron Banner perk Iron Grip, which takes away pretty much all your reload, which could be annoying, however gives you plus 20 stability, which could be pretty interesting. The combination of ricochet rounds, quick draw, and iron grip on this hand cannon might actually allow you to invest into a high range sights while still getting max handling, higher than Sturm, and a big boost to stability from iron grip and ricochet rounds, which again will rival Sturm's. Of course, like I said, this will come at the cost of an insanely slow reload animation, so get your reload mods ready, but my point is this hand cannon might be one of the only ones to actually contest Sturm. Lastly, I already know a lot of people are going to be saying, well, you can't use Icarus on Sturm. I'd argue when you have such a high accuracy through your range, as well as targeting perks you can put on to boost the accuracy, for hitting a single headshot in the air, you probably don't always need Icarus. Landing body shots in the air to me has never really felt difficult or inconsistent. It's always been headshots that are the problem, and the fact that you only need one headshot with 120s, well, takes away a lot of the reason to be using Icarus in my opinion. Anyways, that's all my thoughts and opinions on Sturm, the cones, and how it compares to other aggressive hand cannons. If you actually found this video useful and enjoyable, and you haven't subscribed already, I'd appreciate considering a sub to the channel, as it does support me in my goal of reaching 100,000 subs. Otherwise, just to keep the shameless plugs going, if you'd like to join me live, you can check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/Drewskys. Links in the description. Anyways, thanks for watching as always, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.